Welcome to the 2019 Lions and Legends event. I'm Patrice Gilliam Johnson, and I have the pleasure of serving as the chair of the board of the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League. Before we get started any further, I know there are a number of elected officials in the room. Could I just ask that you stand so that we may acknowledge you? Thank you so much for being with us today. We know you're very, very busy, and we appreciate your taking the time out to be with us during our celebration today. As many of you know, the Lions and Legends celebration has been the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League's premier event over the years. While it has been on hiatus for a bit, let today's service notice that it's back with the same intention of honoring champions, leaders, activists, and legends of the community that exemplify the values of the League to increase self-reliance, parity, and equal opportunity for people of color, and to give voice to those who are voiceless. As I look around the room, I see faces of those who have been in the movement for at least as long as the inception of the organization in 1999. I also see many new faces of individuals who I hope will be touched in some way today that they choose to join us as we work to make our community a level playing field for everyone, not just a chosen few. Under the leadership of the President and CEO of our local affiliate, Mr. Eugene Young, we are finding new avenues and opportunities to do just that. So, as I turn the podium and program over to Eugene, I encourage each of you to enjoy yourselves, but as you do, reflect on what today means, celebrate with our honorees, and decide to join the Urban League movement as we work to evoke continual dialogue and needed transformation as today's honorees have done. Please, let's give our honorees a hand, and let's also welcome our President and CEO, Eugene Young.
All right now, good morning. It was not good enough. We are here at Lions and Legends. We have some amazing people here. We're going to honor some individuals. We're going to announce the winner of an award. We need better than that. We have family, friends, and everything in between. Once again, I come to you saying good morning. So I want to start. I believe in starting the way you want to finish. And so with that said, I want to start by saying a bunch of thank yous. First, thank you to all the board members who are here. All board members, could you please either take a step forward or just raise your hand, or stand up, please, so we can recognize you, rather. I also am going to take a little bit of personal privilege. I am going to thank my personal board. My mother, the CEO of my family, my wife, my daughter, my sons around here somewhere, my in-laws, my father, Reggie Jones, and my mother-in-law, Beverly Jones. I just want to thank them for all their support throughout this last, I would say, around 16 months of my tenure. So thank you so much. Now, getting to business. So the Urban League, we have been in a phase of transition and moving forward. And I'm proud of where we are. For many of you who don't know, we were originally founded and incorporated, as Ms. Francine would say, in 1999. And doors first opened in January, I believe it was January 2nd, 2000. We have been serving the community for a long time now. Primarily when we started, we focused on advocacy under the leadership of then CEO and President Tony Allen and our board chair, the amazing Mr. James Gilliam Sr. Our organization has been more of a hybrid now after the tenure of Lisa Blunt Rochester, who was our second CEO, now Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester, excuse me, and our board chair, Jack Markell, at that time, then Treasurer Jack Markell. We've dived a little bit more into programming as well. But we are one of the few affiliates that has such a strong focus on advocacy. And so I think that makes us very much unique. Right now, we are taking that, we're carrying that baton, and we're focusing and diving in on issues around wealth inequality, criminal justice reform, and education. And I'll speak a little bit more of that a little later towards the tail end. We have Achievement Matters program, which was founded by Ms. Lisa Blunt Rochester, Congresswoman, excuse me. Lisa Blunt Rochester, which is still up and running. We have around 100 kids that's throughout a couple schools within our city, such as Stubbs, also at AI DuPont Middle, right outside the city borders. We also have a great program that we just launched this month, or the end of last month. We'll have it be called the Ella Baker Community Organizing Training, training more people within our community to organize around the issues that matter to them in their community. And we have our fellowship program. Our fellowship program has been started about 2 months into my tenure. And we have, one of the biggest issues that we have is we need to focus more on how do we get our young people, and when I say young, those who are between the ages of, I would say, 21 to 35, how do we get them more involved and engaged? One of the things that oftentimes occurs is people say, there's nothing for me to do, there's no way for me to pursue whatever my talents are, and so they end up leaving or they just become apathetic to the process. So our goal right now is we are going to train those young people to be leaders, the leaders that they want to be. The James H. Gilliam Senior Fellowship, we have 13 fellows from last year. I'm going to call them up. If you guys could just come up and just come around here, I'm just going to give a one-liner. As you can see, their bios are all across the hallway coming into the building. But I believe that you can never praise people who are young people doing the right thing. You can never praise them enough. And so I will be. So with that being said, I would like for Miss Brooklyn Hitchens to come on up. I know, Brooklyn, you're first. Brooklyn is a doctoral student at Rutgers, New Brunswick. She will be getting her PhD a year or so, something like that. Yeah. Yes. In the field of sociology. I would like to call also Miss Lori Jacobs. Where's Lori at? Come on up. Lori is the communication associate with the Rodell Foundation. Lori is also the one that put the time, effort, and work in to prepare those posters out. She's been doing a lot of work. We've been taking a lot of advantage of Lori with her free time, so we greatly appreciate Miss Lori Jacobs. To Mr. Christopher Bell, C.J. Bell, where's he at? He's around here. Chris just started his new job recently of being the campaign coordinator for the re-election campaign of Governor John Carney. So he's doing a lot of great things. So please give it up for Mr. C.J. Bell. We have Ms. Charday White. Charday, please come on up. Charday is the community organization manager for, it's like 5 different things going on over there now. It's Reach Riverside, Kingswood Community Center, the warehouse, the this house, the up house, the down house. She's doing it all. Brittany Gulledge, where is she? There she is. Brittany just left. She was in the communications department at Wilmington University. She recently departed in September of 2018 to head to Howard to get her PhD in communications. Mr. Dubard McGriff, please come on. Smoothest man in the building. I gotta state the obvious, right? He is a community organizer for the Smart Justice Campaign with the ACLU. Please give it up again for Mr. Dubard McGriff. Can I have Miss Littell McBride come on up? Where's Littell at? Where's she at? Littell is a services management analyst with the Department of Health and Social Services. Please give it up for one last time for Littell. And lastly, can we have Miss Dominique Oppenheimer come on up? Where's Dominique? Dominique is the Beau Biden Volunteer Coordinator and also works on the Reproductive Justice Campaign for Network Delaware. And lastly, can I have Mr. Bryant Garcia come up? Yay, Brian is immigration coordinator, program coordinator for La Esperanza. He used to come up and take the trek of almost an hour and a half to be involved in our program, so we greatly appreciate him. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring these individuals up because we are at a crossroads where we need to start thinking about who's up next. Oftentimes, even as of right now, we are celebrating the lives and the work of some amazing individuals, such as Senator Henry, Representative J.J. Johnson, and countless others with the Monday Club. We're recognizing people have put in the work. My question for us as a community is, what are we going to do to train people to now carry the torch? And it starts with us getting them involved, engaged, helping them to figure out what it is that they want to do, and to help open up doors so that they can do what is right for the community. We need our front lines to be even stronger as we move forward. So I think Blake may want to get a picture of them with our board chair and our National Urban League president, and then we'll move on to what is next. Get a quick picture. I can stay in the back. We'll make room. So there's a lot of things that I can probably stand here and speak for about 15 minutes going down the bio of the individual I'm about to introduce. But I'm gonna let his words speak for him. Morial is the national president of the Urban League. He is a former mayor, lawyer, UPenn, correct? UPenn, one of the most brightest men that I've met, and also one of the hardest working men that I've ever met around issues around civil rights. I'm not gonna go into what he's done on paper, but I'm gonna go into what he's done for our community. He's always on the front lines, whether you look at him on TV, or whether you see him knocking doors in Philadelphia for getting more people to get out to vote. He's very much concerned about the 91 affiliates that we have, 90 affiliates that we have across the country, working to provide, leading an organization, working to provide them all with the support that they need. It's a hard job, it's a very hard job. I imagine how sometimes it may be hard for me, but I think about what is the national president, CEO actually going through. So I just keep my mouth shut then. I'm gonna, as I said, I'm gonna keep the intro light just so that he can have more time to provide remarks. Once again, please give a large, great Wilmington pride round of applause for Mr. Marc Morial.
very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. I am very, very honored to be here. Thank you for having me. I want to thank Patrice and Eugene for inviting me and for their tremendous leadership, and ask that you give them another warm round of applause. I want to salute the brother who prepared the food. I had a chat back there with him. I told him he did a nice job. The food is good. And he wants me to know that he is open for business. He wants you all to know he's open for business. I have had the opportunity to visit Delaware and Wilmington on a number of occasions over the last decade or so. I proudly attended school in the city to the north, which is just a little suburb of Wilmington, sometimes known as Philadelphia, at the University of Pennsylvania, and traveled through Wilmington about once or twice a week on the Acela on my way down to D.C., better known as the District of Confusion. So I'm proud to be here, and I want to just thank Eugene for stepping up to the plate and taking on the leadership mantle. Eugene is Gene. Gene's not mean. Gene is clean. And with your help, the Urban League with Gene will have a lot of green. But what's remarkable about this affiliate, quite candidly, is in its time, and there's been some ups and downs, but one of the very first meetings I had when I was named president of the National Urban League is when Tony Allen came to see me in New York. It was in June of really 2003. I think it was the first week that I took over as president, and shared with me the vision for the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League, which at the time was relatively new. I think what's remarkable is that now Tony, of course, Tony went on to the private sector and is now back in higher education here back in the state. The second president, Lisa Blunt Rochester, is now the member of Congress for the state of Delaware, and the first African-American member of Congress from the state of Delaware. My 16-year-old son asked me this morning, I said, I'm going to Delaware. And he said, Delaware, where? Oh yeah, Delaware. And I said, there's a African-American woman representing Delaware in the Congress. He said, really? I said, yes, of course. I said, because she represents this new generation of African-American elected officials who are being elected in non-African-American majority settings. And I think it's a healthy and a positive thing, because African-Americans can lead and represent all people and represent them with distinction and excellence and competence. And so now Eugene stands in the breach, so to speak, to lead this affiliate. And we are excited and committed to doing everything we can to make sure that this affiliate here in Delaware is a force to be reckoned with. A force to be reckoned with. And a force that will both collaborate with and partner with, whether it's business interests or political interests or faith interests or community interests, when their agenda is about economic justice, social justice, and civil rights. And if and when their agenda strays from that, it is our job to hold them accountable and to call them out. We are not guided, we are never guided by personality. We are never guided by partisanship. We're guided by principles and we're guided by the agenda. The Urban League was founded in 1910. The National Urban League came as a result of the amalgamation of 3 smaller community-based organizations in New York City. And its purpose and its reason for being was that at that time you had the mass migration of African Americans from the South. And they were moving to the North because, number one, Reconstruction had come apart and had been destroyed by the Plessy v. Ferguson decision. The Ku Klux Klan was on the rise, and lynchings were beginning in the South. And the cotton economy was in decline as a result of the boll weevil and mechanization. And African Americans began transitioning and traveling, looking for freedom, looking for fairness, and in many instances, just looking to survive by coming to northern cities. And in New York, 2 people, a distinguished African American scholar by the name of George Edmund Haynes. Haynes was the first African American to receive a PhD in social work from Columbia University. He was a native of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. He was a devotee of W.E.B. Du Bois, teamed up with a wealthy white woman by the name of Ruth Standish Baldwin, who was a prominent leader of the suffragette movement in the early 1900s. And they came together, this black man and this white woman, to create the National Urban League in New York City. Their vision was initially only to serve New York City. And then we grew, as many nonprofits of that era grew, by planting affiliates, separate, independent, but related entities in communities across the nation. Today, the National Urban League, as Eugene mentioned, has 90 affiliates in 36 states and the District of Columbia. I want you to know that those 90 affiliates combined have almost 3,000 employees, 2,300 full-time, another 600 to 700 part-time, and are aided by 15,000 volunteers, young professionals like you have here in Wilmington, our historic and legacy guilders, as well as volunteers like Patrice and others who serve on our board of trustees at the local level. Combined, that is what the Urban League movement does. Often asked, what does the Urban League actually do? Here's what I want you to understand and know. What we do is we change the lives of people. In 2017, I don't have the 2018 numbers just yet, we provided job training or job placement services to almost 300,000 people in cities across the nation. We provided after-school services or early childhood opportunities to some 400,000 youth. We assisted some 2,000 people in becoming homeowners for the first time and provided coaching and counseling to over 10,000 small businesses, 60% of them owned by women. 60% of them owned by women. And in this work of social justice, economic justice, and civil rights, I like to say we need tree shakers and we need jelly makers. And there's a time when you have to shake the tree, but there's also a time when you have to make jelly. So how do you look at that? We have to advocate for changes in public policy, whether it's in the criminal justice arena or whether it's in the education arena. But once those policies are on the books, they have to be executed. They have to be implemented. They have to be put in place. And the Urban League is there to assist in doing that, to execute these policies so that progressive public policies can change the lives of people. Here in Delaware, this affiliate wants to, and I think rightfully so, continue its focus on advocacy issues, on the issues of criminal justice. And I want to talk about that. That criminal justice reform is the social justice issue of our time. It is unacceptable for the United States of America, e pluribus unum, freedom, justice, and democracy to have the highest percentage of its population imprisoned than any other nation in the world. It is unacceptable for us to be there. How can we have more people in jail than repressive regimes like China and North Korea? How can we do it and accept it when almost half of those folks are incarcerated, either waiting trial because they can't make bail, or they're in jail because of non-violent offenses? Don't fall into the trap that if you're for criminal justice reform, you're somehow soft on violence. What we are really, really talking about is the oppression of the system. I can talk about it because I was once a criminal defense lawyer. I can talk about it because I was a mayor who ran one of the most successful police reform efforts ever known. And I can talk about it because, unfortunately and regrettably, I have seen too many of the men that I grew up in the neighborhood where I grew up in get trapped in a system and never be able to get back on their feet. So this issue is an issue that we all have to intelligently work on. The good news is that there's a coming together even by forces on the right and on the progressive left who are coming together to say we need to fix these problems. And they are varied and they are many. It's sentencing, it's bail, it's reentry. It's the parole system and the probation system across the board that we indeed have to fix. So I certainly will support and welcome the leadership of Eugene with the board and all of you to make progress here in Delaware when it comes to criminal justice reform. You should make it a top agenda item for everyone here. I want to just cover one or two other items. The second item I want to cover is it was heartening to me that in the 2018 election cycle, we had one of the highest midterm voter turnouts in American history. Now, democracy works best when lots of people vote. Democracy is not designed for elections to be controlled by small numbers of voters, either because people are frustrated or because rules have been written to make it difficult and challenging for people to vote. We have to have, as a nation, an absolute commitment that for 2020, we are going to have the highest voter turnout in American history. That should be our goal. And we need to make sure that every high school student and every 18-year-old in the state of Delaware, wherever they are, becomes a registered voter on the date of their birthday. On the date of their birthday. That message needs to be reinforced by educators. It needs to be reinforced by parents and grandparents and caregivers and elected officials and media personalities and artists and others. We are saying you must be a citizen, and we must understand that activism, being an activist, requires that you participate in the political process. People get confused about the 1960s. They say, well, King and they were marching. They're marching for the right to vote. And it is unacceptable for us to have this right and toss it to the side, to not use it, to come up with all of these pseudo-intellectual arguments about somehow why voting is a waste of time. We cannot surrender our power to others by simply staying home when election day. And I know we've got to challenge officials, and sometimes we have people who run, who address our issues. We have people who run who may not address our issues. I hear people say, well, I looked out and I didn't like none of the candidates running. And I say, well, damn it, vote for the lesser of the evils. Make a choice. That's called keeping it real. Keeping it real. So voting, I want to encourage everything possible to engage with the next generation of voters, the next generation of citizens in our community, to get them involved in the conversation, to help them prepare for leadership. And I think the Fellows Program is an excellent opportunity. These young people who we just saw on this stage are absolute superstars. They're the best, they're the brightest. And if I had a wish, I'd like them to visit every high school in Wilmington. I want the 16, 17, 14, and 15-year-olds to see them, to see what they've accomplished, to see what they've achieved, to hear them say that it wasn't easy, and I had a setback, and maybe I fell down, and maybe somebody pushed me back, and I got up. That's what we need to do. We have to break the media stereotypes of our young people, and we can do it because when you see these young, emerging professionals, I feel confident that our community is going to be in good hands in the future. Final thing I want to address, well, two things. I want to talk to you about how, and you know it, how significant and important it is that we always focus on education. Education is critical, but one issue I think we have to elevate our focus on is what I call financing equity. All across the nation, I'm not sure what the situation here is in Delaware, we have an inequitable system of how we finance public schools. And it is so visible. I visited a school, won't say which school or where it was, in a beautiful suburban community. They invited me for Black History Month, and I thought I was walking on a college campus. The building was beautiful. There was a football and a soccer field. There was an auditorium that, you know, was just first class. And I looked around, and then I began to speak to the teachers. It was African American History Month, and I said, well, how many African American studies classes do you have on the curriculum here? They said, oh, we have 3. And I said, go get me the books. I want to look at the books. And this school, of course, is in a suburban area where I believe that they're probably very well funded. And then later in the month, I went to an inner city school. And there was no fancy football field. There was an auditorium, but it looked like it hadn't seen paint since Truman was president. And I got inside of me, I get these flashes of anger that sometimes turn to sadness, where you say, why is this so? Why is this so? Well, it is so because we do not focus on the fact that our per pupil expenditures differ within a state from county to county, as well as within a school district from school to school. And we have to focus on that. And someone said to me, what difference does it make? So let me give you one simple example, because this person is always in love with data. I say, do you realize that the data shows that a child who learns chemistry with a chemistry lab and not just a chemistry book does better on standardized tests? So if you're teaching chemistry, you can have the best teacher and you can have the most capable students, But if they don't have the opportunity to see those chemistry, if you will, lessons in operation in a lab, then the data shows they will not have the same outcome on standardized tests. I said, secondly, it makes a difference. I visited a school one time, and I asked the principal, what is the secret of your success? He says, well, in every single first, second, and third grade class, I have a second professional in the classroom. I have a reading coach who works with the struggling students so it doesn't take away from the primary teacher's time. Reading coaches cost money. So we have to understand that equitable funding makes a difference at the classroom level, that it makes a difference in things that count. How many of you in here are educators? And how many of you know I'm talking the truth on this? This is really the case. And so we've got to unpack this debate. We get into, I call it head fake, where we're debating things like charter schools versus traditional schools, when we need to be debating what are the elements that it takes for any school to educate our children. The facilities, the teachers, the money that is required, and we have to be advocates for that wherever we go. Because for the Urban League, Eugene, education is an economic justice issue. It is an economic justice issue. We say to young people, go to high school. We say to them, go to post-secondary school, go to community college, go to trade school, go to a four-year college. Make sure you go through what we've got to say to them. If you do that, you're going to make more money. If you do that, your chances of life success are going to be better than if you stop at 10th grade or you stop at 9th grade. We got to keep it real. Young people want to know, if I do this, what will it mean for me? And we can't be afraid to say, it will mean you will earn more. It means you will be able to enjoy more things that you believe you want in your life. We got to have the real conversations with our young people while we encourage them. We've got to also answer that second question that's always looming in their head. I'd go when I was mayor to schools all the time. First thing young people would ask me, it was always so funny. They'd ask me, hey, what you make? And then the second thing they'd say, what kind of car you drive? The guys would ask that. Because you know they're being very real about what their lives are about. Our children live, our young people are growing up in a media society where they see lots of information and they see images and they ask questions. So I wanted to say that to you all. And then I just want to close by making some references to the national front. Yeah, our country is going through a difficult period of division right now. A very difficult period of division, and I'm shocked at being shocked, tired of being shocked, don't know if I'm going to be shocked, or just expect that I'm going to be shocked by what else can indeed happen. But what I hope this does is it inspires people to civic involvement. It tells us that when we are quiet, disengaged, and uninvolved, regimes can arise that can cause great damage to the body politic of our nation. And so we should be inspired and fired up to be part of the resistance to these public policies. We have to. It's not about being partisan. It's not about being partisan, because if you study the history of regimes, we see signs. The idea that an executive can dislike an act of its legislative body and then just decide that I will declare an emergency and go around it. And you know what? That could happen in any instance. It's not about the issue at hand. It's about the process and the procedure that's embedded in the Constitution and the separation of powers. So we as people have to be civically engaged and civically involved. And we have to be committed to vote next year. And I'm not saying to whom you should vote, but I am saying that we need to vote our values and our beliefs. We need to vote. I'm going to be calling every candidate who calls us, whether they have R's, D's, or I's in front of their name. I'm going to ask them, are you going to support the National Urban League's Main Street Marshall Plan, which is a $2 trillion infrastructure plan that would not only rebuild roads and bridges, but would rebuild schools and community centers? Are you going to support that plan? And we're going to call the question with everyone who is running, because we want to know exactly where they stand. And I invite you to do the very same thing. So thank you, Wilmington. Thank you, Delaware. Thank you, Eugene and Patrice, and all of you who are helping to make us strong here in Wilmington. Continue your work. Keep on keeping on. And God bless you this morning.
So we're going to do something real quick. I'm going to, we sent out, when we're getting ready for this event today, one of the things that we want to focus on, we want to thank our legends for a lot of the great work that they've put in, but also one of the things that we want to do is say thank you to some of the unsung heroes, the people that are putting in the work day in, day out, who may not be recognized, may not be known. And with that, I want to ask our People's Choice Award nominees to come up, please. Coley, Ariel, Jay Francis. Come on up, come on up. So these three individuals were nominated, and we had a couple people nominated, but we had to cut it off. Miss Wright, put it down, Miss Wright. All right. So we had a couple people nominated, and this is the group that a committee was able to select. And we were able to select this group, and then we had a group of individuals involved with the Urban League, may they be board members, majority board members, and some people outside of our board, to select who would be the winner of the People's Choice Award. All three of them have long, distinguished bios, so I'm not going to get into them because we have them right here in front of you. But I just want to say, I really want to say this just for all three of them. We have, in our community, we have some people who are just doing things when they're not even being asked to do them, right? Whether it's Ariel with the work she does with the YPs, just being involved and engaged around a variety of different issues in community when she's not asked to do it, is very much important and very much needed. That's a proud family member back there, I can see. There we go. Jay has been doing a lot of work with Senator Coons, but also he's doing everything in the community. I see him like chasing or racing kids in the street to holding civic association meetings. He does a lot of work. And Coley is another star as well. I was just telling Coley a story. When I actually met Coley's wife first, right? And it was interesting because when I met her, she said, "You need to meet my husband. My husband is in plays, he's fighting for the community." This is 6 years ago. I had never met Coley or anything, but his wife was his biggest cheerleader. It was a beautiful thing to witness and to hear. We can only select one, but we encourage everyone to continue the work that they're doing. I'm going to call up a friend of mine, Mr. Andrew Johnstone. Please come on up. Andrew Johnstone has a company, All-in-One Transportation, and they are probably the largest black-owned transportation company in the state of Delaware. And he does a lot of work in the community. He and I met Coach, I call him Coach Andrews. I met him close to 10 years ago, 15, geez, don't age me like that. I met him 15 years ago. We were coaching kids, none of them being ours. He was giving up a lot of his time to help out a bunch of kids and provide them with the tutoring, the tutelage, just mentoring young people when he didn't have to. And so with that, I'm gonna have, I call him Coach Andrews, but I'm gonna have Mr. Andrew Johnstone talk a little bit, a couple lines about his company, and then I'm going to ask Marc to come up, and he's going to open the envelope with the winner. Is that fair? That's the way it was going to go anyway. So yes, absolutely.
First of all, good afternoon, everybody. What a great looking group. Again, I'm Andrew Johnstone. I know some of the faces here from my day job, but my other life, I'm one of the owners of All-in-One Transportation and Bus Company. We were founded in 2012 and based in Wilmington, Delaware. I am not a Delawarean, I'm a New Yorker, but I've been here so long and my kids are born here, so I am a Delawarean, yes. All-in-One Transportation, we service school districts in Newcastle County for an underserved part of our community. We transport children that are displaced through foster care, guardianship, or homelessness. So when a child is outside of the footprint of the school district, that's when we come in to transport those students. We transport upwards of 500 kids a day through buses and vans. So due to the intimacy of a van ride with a driver, we are able to forge relationships with kids, with children that otherwise don't have that stability. So for at least 10 months out of the year, a child is sitting in a van in close proximity with a good role model, right? We're very proud of that. We also employ, between the two companies, upwards of close to 50 people, all mostly Wilmington, Delaware residents, and mostly women of color. So we're very proud about that. And I just want to thank Gene for the opportunity to sponsor this award. As we always try to be involved in the community, every year we give away book bags to this segment of children that maybe don't have it, as well as Christmas toys. So we try and stay active in the community as well. So. Back to you, Jim. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to ask our National Urban League president to come on up, and he will say who is the winner. He's not going to do a Steve Harvey while he's up here. No Steve Harvey, but we'll go from there.
Drum roll, please. And ladies and gentlemen, the winner is Mr. Coley Harris.
Hold on, before Coley speaks, one of the things, reason why we had, as I call him, Coach Andrews come up is because we also understand that people who give their time and their efforts to causes when they don't have to, sometimes they get worn out, right? Sometimes they get tired. Sometimes they can get drained, spending time away from their family, and so on and so forth. So as a thank you for the work that is being done in the community, we just want to offer a small token of appreciation. So through All-in-One Transportation, we're going to give Mr. Coley Harris a $500 check today just to thank him for it. So, So I'd love for Mr. Harris to speak a couple words.
Oh, man.
And go from there.
I am extremely humbled to be here. I don't do the work that I do for any type of praise or any type of rewards. thank God, thank my community, thank my family, my mother, my father, my wife, and so many people in this room that have supported me, continue to support me in just my little journey to do my part. Structural violence, institutionalized racism is as close as my next breath. As I sat there, I thought about where I was positioned at the table, and it's 80s around me. So to my left, I have my father, who's 80 years old, and to my right, my grandson, who's barely 80 days old. And I can remember my father telling me growing up in rural Virginia, being the oldest son of a sharecropper, how they would stick newspaper in between the cracks in the house to keep the wind from blowing through. And I look to my right and I see my grandson who's 80 days old, and I want everything in the world for him. And so I find myself in a position where I'm poised at, where it is not a luxury, it is not a choice, but it is a responsibility for me to stand up and stand on my feet as a man, as a black man in this country, and make sure that I continue, as long as God puts breath in my lungs, to struggle and fight for equal justice, equal rights, equal education, equal employment, and just overall equal treatment of people who've been marginalized, people who have been held down and pushed aside. And with that, I want to thank you all. Thank you for giving me this award. I'm extremely humble, and God bless you.
Let's give it up for our nominees again, just one more time, please. Now I'm going to call up our board chair, Dr. Patrice Gilliam Johnson, and she'll be presenting our Chairman's Award.
So let me just say that I am honored to present the Chairman's Award to today's honoree. As many know, this award is named in honor of my father, James H. Gilliam, Sr., who worked tirelessly in the Urban League movement, first as a member of the National Urban League's Board of Directors, and then as a founder of the local Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League affiliate in 1999. Those who knew my dad know that he was an implementer of real-world ideas and solutions to some of the worst conditions facing our community. As such, the James H. Gilliam Senior Award recognizes a pioneer for outstanding contributions and leadership in the fight for civil rights and a more equal and inclusive America. It is with pleasure and privilege that we award the Monday Club with the James H. Gilliam Senior Chairman's Award. Or if they could all come up and we can take a picture. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about the Monday Club for those of you who may not know. The Monday Club is the oldest black men's social club in the state of Delaware. It's believed to be the oldest in the United States. The club was started in 1876 and essentially was established because during that particular period of time, laborers had a difficult time getting together to support one another and socialize. And the only day they had off was Monday to do that. So hence the name, the Monday Club. What I'd like you to know, though, is that in spite of all of the numerous things that they've done, they have done a number of different activities to be of profit to the community of Delaware. Some of those include raising a number of scholarships for our students over the years, to support a number of programs such as the Little League teams, mentoring, community cleanup projects, and youth Christmas events. So can we give them another round of applause?
We would like to definitely thank the Urban League for this recognition. We are truly honored to be standing before you this evening. I had the pleasure, the first year I was president in 2008, to meet Brother Gilliam. Norman Oliver took me out to meet Mr. Gilliam. And I can tell you, I can remember the conversation that he had with me regarding the Urban League and that journey back in 1999. And I can hear the dedication and the commitment that Brother Gilliam had for his community. I had recently moved from South Carolina to be here in Delaware to marry my wonderful wife. And I learned more in those 2 hours with Brother Gilliam than I had in probably those 7 years prior. And I thank him for that. Also, the last thing I want to give you is about dedication of the Monday Club and the dedication of the community. I want to just say just a quick story about Brother Woodrow Wilson, who Wilmington University bears his name at the Graduate Center. Brother Wilson was a member of the Monday Club, and we had spring cleaning every year there at the club. In my second year at the club, I had an opportunity to be a part of the spring cleaning, and Brother Wilson was there. He could barely walk at that time, but he was there with us. And he was wiping down the walls and wiping down the tables. And when we started to journey upstairs, I remember meeting him at the steps because he could barely bring his leg up to the first steps. And I remember touching his shoulder and telling him, Brother Wilson, no need for you to go upstairs. Let us take care of this. And the look he gave me, I will never forget. He said, brother, this is my club, just like it's yours. I'm going to go upstairs. Either you help me or you move out of the way. And I never forget that. So anytime, I was going to say it to you guys anyway, anytime I speak to represent the Monday Club, I always have Monday Club members to stand. And the reason why I do that is because when Brother Wilson was ill and in the hospital, I went to visit him. And we had a conversation that was fantastic. And after about 30 minutes, I was leaving the hospital room, and he called me back, first year being president. He called me back. He said, Brother Mo, I want you to know one thing. There's no one man bigger than our club. And that's why we stand as a unit. Once again, we thank you. We love you. We're celebrating our 125-year ball on June the 22nd, where we're giving out 5 scholarships. You guys are more than welcome to join us at the Chase Center. We love you. Thank you.
All right, so 2 more awards to give out. With that said, I would like to bring up our lead director and board member of the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League, Ms. Ray Jones Avery. Please give a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Little Tempe Mitchell Community Services Award is named in honor of Mr. Mitchell. We lovingly called him Lit, a former Tuskegee Airman who was one of the first Black teachers of white students in the state of Delaware. He oversaw campaigns for fair housing, equal access to public accommodation, and equal education and employment opportunities. Mr. Mitchell's list of contributions and accomplishments are extensive. The beautiful Heritage Museum that hopefully all of you got a chance to go into is named in honor of Mr. Mitchell and his wife. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to some and to reintroduce to many former State Representative James J.J. Johnson, who is the definition of public service. This service started officially when he served our country in the United States Army. He later went on to work at the Chrysler plant in Newark and became the president of the UAW, United Auto Workers, and a member of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. In 2004, Representative Johnson was elected to represent the 16th District in the General Assembly. During his tenure, it is hard to find any individual in the House more respected and admired by his colleagues on both sides of the aisles, and I had the opportunity to see him at work many times. He fought and continues to fight tirelessly for our people and those living on the margins. Just a few examples of the legislation he championed or banned the box legislation, and many of us in this room benefit today. Bail reform, which is an ongoing fight. Legislation changing the rules and procedures for juvenile solitary confinement, and legislation allowing for juveniles to have their records expunged. Today, we thank Representative Johnson for his distinguished service, and more importantly, we thank his family, his lovely wife, Ernestine, for sharing him with us and our state. As he comes forward, please give a round of applause. I asked him, is there anything special you would like for me to say about you? He wants me to tell you all, he's still good looking. Come on, come on. On behalf of the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League, Lions and Legends, you are being presented the Littleton P. Mitchell Community Service Award, presented to Representative James J.J. Johnson on this day, March the 2nd, 2019.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I was only joking when I said that, right? First of all, I'd like to recognize Mayor Marc H. And I always think of him as mayor because the last time I had an opportunity to meet with him was in 1994 when we was in New Orleans. And he was mayor, and we spoke about it today, and he said that was his first year. I didn't remember the year. I asked my wife. She always remembers the date. And my wife and I were down there together, and we had a wonderful time in New Orleans. And the food was really good. Matter of fact, my wife took a cooking lesson, but I don't know what happened to that lesson. I'd like to thank the Urban League, and I would be remiss if I didn't give homage to the founder, Jim Gilliam. Not only the founder of the Wilmington Metropolitan Urban League, but his philanthropy. I know that I think probably the last time that I went out to visit him was with B.B. Coker, myself, Lee Jarman, I think it was Norman Oliver. And we went out there to talk to him because he was a soft touch. After we got our lecture, he was able to support us because we had a new organization that we had developed is the Martin Morial voter registration. And you probably remember that, don't you, BB, when we went out there and spoke to him. He was a man of the people, and his whole family was a man of the people. Now, his son, as well as his daughter. And Patrice, thank you for carrying on.
Thank you.
You spoke about some of the legislation, but each piece of the legislation has a story. But I just want to talk about two pieces of legislation because they come to mind. And probably you spoke about the ban the box legislation. When you do legislation, you need support from probably both sides of the aisle, as well as both the House and the Senate. And I always could count on Senator Henry when she was in the Senate to support my legislation. And ban the box legislation was not only a big supporter from both sides of the aisle, but the governor of the state was a big supporter. The other piece of legislation that comes to mind, and Eugene knows what I'm talking about on this one, and that's bail reform. 2017, Eugene came to me, him and Kate Parker, and they said that they had the legislation that they wanted me to look at and support, and that was to do with bail reform. And I was able to introduce the bill in the House, and I think it was Senator Townsend that introduced the bill in the Senate. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy bill to get passed. And if not by the support of lobbyists such as Eugene, working both in the House and the Senate, we were able to get that legislation passed. Gene, I want to thank you for the hard work you did. It's not just the sponsor of the legislation and the support that they get. And it is an honor for me to be being honored today at the same time Senator Henry is. Senator, this is about the third time we received honors together. She was saying earlier that we should take this show on the road. But I want to thank Senator Henry for all your years, especially when she was in the Senate. She was in there, she was not only the only African-American in the Senate, but the only African-American woman in the Senate. And it was kind of like, you hear the story about Jim Brown when he was playing football, when he first started playing football, and he had to run the ball, and he was the only African-American on that team running. And you know he wasn't getting any blocks. He had to run a lot on his own, and Senator Henry was more or less doing the same thing. So I want to thank her. And it's an honor to be here with her. Thank you. And God bless the Urban League.
Thank you so much, Representative Johnson. We're pretty much to the tail end of everything. It's funny, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna embarrass myself. So I sent Representative Johnson a text last night and a call, and I said, well, I texted him, he didn't respond. I called him, he didn't respond. And I remember when he said, before he was gonna retire, I said, you're not retiring, are you? He said, yeah, I'm gonna retire. He said, I'm not gonna be in here, dying here, and then my wife goes out, marries some young man, and travel all around the world. I'm going to enjoy my time with my wife. And I got nervous. I said, let me go on out here, and I went over to Representative Johnson's house at like 8 o'clock this morning, like, hey, you know you need to be here. Don't you be traveling with your wife? So very much appreciative of Representative Johnson. I have the honor, privilege, and pleasure of introducing a trailblazer for our Whitney M. Young Award. Senator Margaret Rose Henry has been active in Delaware and just involved in the games. There's so many things I even learned from when she came to speak to our fellows not too long ago. I remember her telling me, you know, I used to work at Ingleside. You used to work at Ingleside? Then she was like, you know, I used to work, and I, what? But she's been giving so much of her time, her energy, her talents to serving others, even outside of being in the state legislature. As Representative Johnson said, she is the first, she was the first woman of color elected into the Delaware State Senate over 20 years ago. I'm going to kind of scrap what I have written down because kind of speak a little bit from the heart. I remember her personally because I used to work for Representative Stephanie, make sure you say T. Bolden. I used to work for Representative Stephanie T. Bolden as her aide, and I used to also work for Representative Helene Keeley. And it's interesting because there was oftentimes, anytime when they would have legislation, and this is how I got to know Senator Margaret Rose Henry, they would always say, because you need a sponsor in the Senate side to jump on something with you. And so they would both say these two words when they needed a Senate sponsor. They would both say to me, ask Margaret. And so any piece of legislation, whether it's around education, whether it's around criminal justice reform, anything, it was go and ask Margaret so that she could be our sponsor in the Senate. Everyone, I can't tell you how much she's so respected, so much revered down in the General Assembly. She has done our city and our state so well. And that speaks for her and Representative Johnson. You know, there's this idea that someone said that a lot of times legislators want something from talk out of their neck, or they'll say something to you like, yeah, I'm going to support that legislation, but then they support the wants and needs of others when they're down in Dover. And I must say that Representative Johnson and Senator Henry, they were straight shooters. If they said they're going to support something, they're going to support it, even if it meant catching lumps down in the General Assembly. Because a lot of people did not want them to bring forth a lot of the legislation that they pushed down in General Assembly, because there's a lot of differences, there's a lot of different issues, and there's a lot of different politics. But she stayed steadfast. And it makes I can't express, like, we are really, I got emotional when I found out that they were both leaders. I said, geez Louise, like, this is a lot, because they've done so much for our community. The legislation that they've passed, ladies and gentlemen, will impact the lives of your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and so on and so forth moving on. Because that's how impactful this policy is to our day in and day out lives. And I can't thank Senator Henry enough for the work that she's done. I know that I would be remiss if I did not say this. One of the things that she is most proud of are her two raised sons, John and Marcus, who are both married and successful in their own right. She is the proud grandmother of Miles, Isaiah, yeah, Henry, Alexander Henry, Gabrielle Henry, who refers to her as Mimi. So without further ado, I want to ask you to give a warm round of applause for Senator Margaret Rose Henry. And before she speaks, I want to do one more thing. We are going to, after this, she's received the highest award that one can be given in the Urban League, which is the Whitney Young Award. But what we're going to do is, because of being such a groundbreaker, being such a trailblazer, there will be a Margaret Rose Henry Award moving forward in her name and honor. So thank you so much. You want me to hold this?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, thank you for still being here. I've been very, very lucky in my life. Much has been given to me, therefore it's my responsibility to give as much back as I possibly can. It's been an honor to represent our wonderful state. I've been involved in the Urban League since the very beginning, and I was a friend of Mr. Gilliam's, and I want to tell you he'd be very proud of all of us today, that we have accomplished so much and that there's still a lot to do. But I think with Eugene in our head, I think we will accomplish many, many things. I'm going to stop because JJ gave my speech. Beautiful. He always does. We've been a tag team like forever. I want to say that leadership It's only possible because people are willing to encourage you and nurture you and help support you. So I'm grateful for all of my friends and colleagues over the years in many, many spheres. It didn't matter whether you were D or R to me, I've been all of those things. And that's how that's how you make things happen, all kidding aside. And I'm looking forward to the Margaret Rose Henry Award because I want to really have some input into what that's about. So thank you so much for staying, and thank you for coming, and thank you for supporting the Urban League. Thank you.